My name is Stephanie Allen. I was born and raised in a quiet suburb in Oregon. From the outside, my family looked like the picture of middle-class American life. A house with a lavender-filled front yard, a neat white picket fence, and cozy family dinners under warm lighting. But inside, things were far from as pleasant as they appeared. I was the firstborn of my parents, Mark and Linda Allen, both firm believers in modern parenting methods. My father, a software engineer with a passion for math, always dreamed of having a brilliant, exceptional child. My mother, she once told her friends she had read over 40 books on child psychology before I was born. I was brought into this world with high expectations, monitored, measured, and experimented on like a research project. But by the time I turned 3 and still couldn't count to 20 or write my name properly, Mom's disappointment became obvious. "Mark, I don't think she's capable of learning as fast as we hoped," she said, a mix of frustration and caution in her voice. "We need to intervene early so we don't miss the golden stage." My dad just nodded slightly, but I remember how he looked at me that day. Like I was a math problem that yielded the wrong answer, not worth solving any further. When I was 4, my younger sister Claire was born. And from that moment on, everything at home changed. Mom seemed to become a different person. Every corner of the house was filled with brain-boosting toys, emotion flashcards, and advanced learning tools you'd only find in elite education centers. I still remember that afternoon. I was quietly building Lego blocks in the corner of the living room when Mom walked by, glanced at me, and sighed. "Claire is only 7 months old and already responding to 3-step sequences. Never mind, keep playing." Claire had a musical high chair, imported fabric books from Sweden, and a private Montessori tutor before she turned 2. And me? I had pre-printed workbooks, a stubby pencil, and daily reminders that I needed to try harder if I wanted to achieve anything. When I was 8, I won 2nd place in the school-wide art competition. I brought my painting home, bursting with excitement. Mom glanced at it and said, Well, Claire read an entire short story in English today." Dad didn't say anything. He was busy installing a logic puzzle board for Claire downstairs. I learned not to expect anything. No praise, no rewards, no proud glances. I slowly became a shadow in my own family. Present, but never really seen. The breaking point came in the fall of the year I turned 12. I had always had my own room. The upstairs one with the window that overlooked the small forest behind our house, where morning light filtered through the blinds in soft beams. I loved that room. It was the only place where I felt like myself. One evening, just after I finished my homework and was hanging up a new drawing on the wall, Claire barged in. "Mom says I'm moving up here. This room's bigger, and I need space for my new study corner." I looked at her, thinking it was a joke. "No," I said firmly. "This is my room." Claire shrugged and walked out. Less than 24 hours later, when I got home from school, everything had changed. My things had been moved into the smaller room next to the laundry room. The old room now had Claire's name on it, packed with new learning equipment and a pristine white study desk. I walked into the new room, tiny, cramped, and cold. The bed touched the wall. The desk was too small for both my books and a lamp. I stood there, fists clenched, choking back tears. "Mom," I called. "Why would you do this? That was my room. I've had it since I was little." She didn't even turn around. "You're older now. You should learn to give way. Claire needs it more. Don't make a scene, Stephanie." I didn't answer. I walked back in, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The light from the hallway spilled through the crack under the door, pale and unfamiliar. For the first time, I felt it clearly. In that house, I was the afterthought, despite being the firstborn. By the time I reached senior year of high school, life in the Allen household still revolved around Claire. She was now a top student at a prestigious private high school, chauffeured in a brand new SUV with a private tutor visiting twice a week. And me? I still attended public school, walked to class every morning, and handled everything on my own, from academics to extracurriculars. I never complained. I was used to being behind the spotlight. But I wasn't prepared for the moment when every last illusion of fairness was shattered. Right at the dinner table. That night, my grandparents, Arthur and Helen, came to visit. They were the only ones in the family who ever made me feel seen, heard. We were eating Mom's lasagna, and Claire was going on and on about her summer program plans at Stanford. "That's wonderful," Grandma Helen smiled, then turned to me. "And what about you, Stephanie? Have you thought about college yet?" I looked up, for the first time feeling hopeful that I might get to share something of my own. "I applied to the University of Oregon and UC Davis. I just got accepted into Oregon's business program. Partial scholarship. If I get more financial aid, then—" I didn't even finish before Mom set down her fork and knife. The sound echoed sharply. "Stephanie," she said, her voice tight, "your father and I have talked. We can't provide more help with your tuition this year." I blinked. "What?" Dad jumped in, as if rehearsed. "We need to prioritize Claire. She's been invited to an Ivy League prep program. It's a rare opportunity." My heart sank. "So, all the college savings you said were for both of us are going to Claire?" Mom sighed like she was stating the obvious. "Claire has real potential. You, Stephanie, might want to consider starting at community college and transferring, or taking time to work isn't a bad option either." Not a bad option? It took me a moment to realize they were completely cutting me off. The room went silent. No one spoke, except for the quiet clink of Grandma Helen's spoon against her plate. "Linda," she said, her voice low but firm. "Both girls are my granddaughters. I can't sit here and watch one be cast aside." Mom pursed her lips. "Mom, this isn't—" "Yes, it is," Grandpa Arthur interrupted. "It absolutely is our business." That night, as I was clearing dishes in the kitchen, Grandma Helen came over, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to carry this burden anymore," she said. "We'll pay for your college tuition. All of it. No loans needed." I turned, eyes red. "But that's too much money." "It's not too much when it's an investment in someone who tries," she smiled gently. "You don't need favoritism to shine, Stephanie. You've already done it on your own." That fall, I moved into the dorms at the University of Oregon. The day I left home, Mom gave me a half-hearted hug at the door and said, "Be frugal, and don't expect anything from us." Claire didn't even look up from her phone. I stepped out of that house, dragging my suitcase across the front yard path, feeling like I had just opened a new door. One without condescending stares or bitter comparison. College was a different world. There, I wasn't the average kid, no longer the shadow behind a self-proclaimed genius. I was Stephanie Allen, a business student with a sharp mind and an unbreakable spirit. Professors praised my strategic thinking. Friends came to me for help with assignments, and every weekend night I called my grandparents to tell them about every small step forward I made. My parents didn't call. They didn't check in either. And strangely, I wasn't upset. I didn't need it anymore. I had stopped seeking validation from a place where it was never freely given. What I had now was real value, one that came from within. I entered my senior year of college with a sense of certainty I had never dared to imagine. Thanks to late-night study sessions in the library, part-time shifts at a small downtown cafe where I learned how customers really think, and hours spent devouring every investment model I could find online, I started to get noticed. One of my finance professors, Dr. Elgin, referred me to a competitive summer internship at a well-known investment firm in Seattle, Bradley and Lane Capital. I still remember the first interview. Glass conference room, gleaming oak table, and 3 managers sitting across from me, each holding my resume. "Allen," one of them asked, "what do you think is the most important factor when creating an investment strategy?" I replied, "Understanding, not just the data, but the psychology behind it." They glanced at each other and nodded. I got the offer. And from that summer on, everything changed. After graduating with honors and having a research project published in a financial journal, I was offered a full-time role at Bradley and Lane as a junior investment analyst. I worked tirelessly, learning everything from risk reports, shareholder presentations, to how to read between the lines in volatile market charts. 3 years later, during a routine review of a high-net-worth client portfolio, I discovered something troubling. A group of tech stocks our firm had heavily invested in showed signs of artificial growth. The internal indicators looked unusually strong compared to the overall market. Most analysts saw it as breakout potential, but I didn't. I spent 2 sleepless nights combing through every number, tracing back appendix reports, and finally uncovered the truth. Those companies were inflating revenue through internal transactions, essentially buying their own products to fabricate sales. If we didn't pull out in time, we'd lose at least $32 million, 0 cents, in client funds. I couldn't stay silent. That Monday morning, I walked into the executive boardroom with a 42-page analysis and a risk simulation model. No one interrupted. When I finished, the CFO sat in stunned silence before turning to the CEO and saying, "She just saved the company." Within 3 days, the entire portfolio was restructured according to my proposal. And 6 months later, not only had we avoided a massive loss, but the firm reported an 11.4% growth, the highest in 7 years. I was promoted to lead investment strategist. But I didn't stop there. I started using my after hours to develop a risk scoring system based on market behavior, integrating factors like consumer psychology, social media trends, and global political shifts. It was the kind of thing the industry always called unquantifiable. I called it PRISM. At first, PRISM was a personal project, but after it accurately predicted price swings in 3 major stock groups ahead of key events, upper management took notice. A year later, the system was officially integrated into the firm's core strategy, helping Bradley and Lane surpass 2 of its top competitors in the sector. I still remember the day I was called into the senior boardroom. The CEO, Richard Langley, smiled at me once everyone was seated. "Stephanie," he said, "we're creating an entirely new position, Chief Strategic Investment Officer. And no one is more deserving than you." I could hardly breathe. Just 4 years earlier, I was told I might want to work for a while and figure things out later. That role wasn't just a title. It was proof of everything I had overcome, from being the forgotten child in my own family to becoming the one leading the table in a multi-million-dollar firm's boardroom. That evening, I didn't celebrate with champagne or a party. I went to my grandparents' house, a simple red brick home filled with warmth. Grandma Helen was baking, and Grandpa Arthur was making tea. I laid the appointment letter on the table. They looked at each other and smiled. "Little Stephanie," Grandpa said, now leading the way. I looked at him, then at Grandma, the first person who believed I didn't have to be exceptional to be worthy. For the first time, I didn't need anyone's approval. I had already proven it. To myself. With quiet grit, relentless effort, and unwavering belief. After accepting the role of Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane, I knew I needed to mark the moment. Not with grandeur, but with a small, warm gathering for those who had stood by me. My grandparents, a few close friends, a couple of trusted colleagues. When I mentioned the idea to my mother, she immediately offered, "You should let us host it. Do it at home, make it more intimate, the family can reunite too." I hesitated, but she continued, "You just need to send the money for catering and decorations. I'll handle the guest list and everything else." I was unsure, but thought maybe, after all these years, this could be our chance to start over. I transferred $3,500, 0 cents to her account, and didn't ask further. A week later, when I arrived at the old house in Salem, the place where I'd grown up, slowly fading behind Claire's shadow, I never expected to walk into a perfectly staged performance. The house was more lavishly decorated than I imagined. White orchids covered the dining tables, soft golden ribbons wound up the staircase, and the scent of gourmet dishes filled the air. I saw my grandparents by the small bar, chatting with a few relatives. Claire descended the stairs in a striking red satin dress, face perfectly made up. Walking beside her was a tall, polished man I didn't recognize. People began gathering around, and just as I raised my glass to speak, my mother stood abruptly, beaming. "Dear family," she announced, "we're here today not just to reconnect, but to celebrate something truly special. Claire and her boyfriend Andrew are officially engaged." Cheers and applause erupted. I stood frozen. I turned to my mother. Her eyes passed over me like I was just another guest at a party I had paid for. I stepped forward to speak, but my father intercepted, gripping my wrist like a period at the end of a sentence. "Don't ruin this," he muttered, voice sharp as steel. "If you make a scene now, don't expect anything else from this family. No contact, no inheritance, nothing." I pulled his hand off mine and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to leave, to let them drown in their own play. But the other part, the one that had lived too long in the shadows, refused to stay silent. I returned to the center of the room, raised my champagne glass, and said, "Excuse me, everyone. May I have just a moment?" All eyes turned to me. Claire paused mid-step. My mother's brow creased. "This gathering today," I began, calm but clear, "was planned to celebrate a major milestone in my life. I was recently named Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane, a major financial firm in Seattle." I paused, scanning the room. "I'm the one who sent the money for this event. My mother agreed to organize it, and never once mentioned it would be turned into an engagement party." Murmurs rippled through the room. My grandparents stood still, stunned. "I'm not against Claire's engagement," I continued. "What I can't stay silent about is the fact that my own family tried to erase me from my own moment, just like they did all throughout my childhood." Andrew turned to Claire, confusion in his eyes. "You told me this was just a family gathering." Claire's face flushed. "Andrew, I just wanted to wait for the right time." "By using your sister's money to stage your big reveal?" he cut in, voice lowering. "I came here expecting to feel welcomed, not to watch someone be pushed out of their own moment." He set his glass down and walked away. Claire chased after him, in vain. The room fell into suffocating silence. My father stood, face red with anger. "You should know your place, Stephanie. This is still—" "No," I interrupted. "This is a place built on favoritism. It's not a home anymore." I turned to my grandparents. They hadn't moved. Grandma Helen's eyes shimmered, and Grandpa Arthur gripped my hand as I stepped toward them. "I don't need the rest of this family to know who I am." And I walked out the door, the same one I had once left in silence, but this time my head was held high. Andrew left the party without a word, leaving behind Claire's panicked gaze and a stunned family. She chased him to the porch, but the car door shut before she could say anything. The Mercedes taillights disappeared behind the trees, leaving the room in a silence that had once been filled with laughter. Claire turned back, her tears quickly replaced by fury. "You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand seeing me happy, so you destroy everything." I stood still. I didn't respond. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt, just tired. Of the same tired blame, played like a broken record. "Claire," Grandma Helen said, voice calm but sharp, "you made your choices. Don't dump the consequences on your sister." My mother rushed forward, face pale with rage and embarrassment. "Stephanie, who do you think you are to humiliate your sister in front of our family?" "I don't need to think," I replied quietly. "I just told the truth, and I've stayed quiet long enough." My father grabbed my mother's hand, trying to hold her back, but his eyes were blazing. "If you walk out of here today," he said, his voice ice cold, "you're no longer part of this family. Don't expect an inheritance. Don't expect to ever call us again. As far as we're concerned, you never existed." I was about to speak when Grandpa Arthur, who had silently observed the entire evening, suddenly stepped forward, his voice ringing out like a bronze bell in the quiet room. "David, if you're going to cut Stephanie out of this family, then it's time we clarify a few things." Grandma Helen took his hand and stepped forward with him. My mother looked at them, as if sensing something was coming. "We updated our will 3 months ago," she said calmly. "The entire estate, the house, the savings, the investment shares, it's all going to Stephanie." My mother let out a shocked gasp. "What?" "We've seen enough," Grandpa Arthur said. "Enough to know who lives by their values and who lives off of being coddled." "Claire is my biological daughter," my mother nearly screamed. "Why her?" "Because she's the only one in this family who never demanded anything, never complained, and never stepped on others to lift herself up," Grandma Helen replied, her voice trembling slightly but her eyes steady. "We don't reward favoritism or deceit." Claire burst into tears, her pride unraveling. She ran up the stairs, her red dress flaring like a bleeding stroke on a collapsing painting. My mother stood in the middle of the room, lips trembling. My father turned away, silent. I clutched my purse, looking at my grandparents, heart swelling. I never asked for this. I don't need the inheritance." "We know," Grandpa Arthur said, smiling. "And that's exactly why you deserve it more than anyone." I looked around the house, once a wound, now a stage for truth to come to light. One by one, the relatives rose from their seats, avoiding my gaze as if they had just awakened from a misguided dream. No one stopped me as I turned to leave. I stepped outside, the spring night breeze brushing my cheek, carrying the familiar scent of apple blossoms from the backyard. I heard the door shut behind me. This time, it wasn't a door slamming shut. It was a final chapter, closing on years of endurance. On the drive back to my grandparents' home, Grandma Helen reached over and gently took my hand. "You don't have to fight to prove yourself anymore, Stephanie," she said. "Now you get to just be." I looked at her, eyes stinging. I had never felt so at peace. Not because of the money, not because of recognition, but because, for the first time, I had chosen myself over chasing approval from people who never truly wanted to see me. 3 years have passed since that night, the night I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, carrying the truth, the pain, and the strength I never knew I had. I never looked back, and never felt the need to. During those 3 years, I poured my heart into my work at Bradley and Lane. Every early morning before sunrise, every quiet night on the 19th floor. There I was, refining strategy, tweaking the Prism algorithm, listening to the market, and leading my team through moments that once felt impossible. When the current CEO, Richard Langley, announced his retirement, no one expected him to choose me as his successor. But to me, it wasn't luck. It was the result of every effort, every sleepless night, and every hard decision I had ever made. On the day I was officially appointed CEO of Bradley and Lane Capital, I was 30 years old, the youngest female CEO in the firm's 60-plus-year history. The announcement took place in the main hall, camera lights flashing, every seat filled with shareholders. I stood on that stage, not to impress, but to represent a new generation, one that doesn't have to be born into glory to create its own. After the speech, I took out my phone and called my grandparents. "I did it," I whispered, voice thick with emotion. Grandpa Arthur laughed on the other end, and Grandma Helen repeated the words I'll never forget. "You've always been worthy, Stephanie, from day one." Meanwhile, 40 miles away, in the town of Salem where I grew up, things hadn't changed much. Claire was now 27. She no longer wore the engagement ring, nor held a steady job. After Andrew walked away that night, her life spiraled through one failed attempt after another. She dropped a fashion course, saying it was too much pressure, tried being a content creator but quit because no one gets my style, and eventually moved back in with our parents. Into the same room she once took from me. I haven't spoken to my parents since that night. Sometimes my grandparents mention that they've asked about me through mutual friends, but I don't care anymore. I've learned that not every relationship is meant to be kept, especially when it's built on denial and selfishness. Every Sunday afternoon, I visit my grandparents for dinner. We toast bread, flip through old photo albums I once thought were buried forever. Grandma Helen still tells little stories from my childhood, and Grandpa Arthur pretends not to remember them, just so I have to retell every detail. One time, I asked them if they ever regretted leaving everything to me. "We didn't leave it because of what it was worth," Grandma said. "We left it to the one who understood the value of choice, the one who chose integrity over convenience, silence when it mattered, and voice when it counted." I smiled, because I knew that was the greatest inheritance they gave me. Not assets, but faith. One spring afternoon, as I was leaving the office after a global strategy meeting, I saw someone waiting in the main lobby. I squinted, then realized it was Claire. She looked thinner, her gaze uncertain, but still wore her signature look. Designer coat and polished heels. "I'm not here to apologize," Claire said immediately, like a shield. I just want to know how you're doing so well, without anyone lifting you up." I looked at her, not angry, not pitying, because I once had nothing, Claire. And that's when I learned to stand on my own. "That's something you've never had to do." Claire stared at me for a long moment. She said nothing, then turned and walked away. I don't know if she'll ever change, but I do know I'll never go back to being the sister who always yielded, always endured, always stayed silent to keep the peace. I walked back to my office, where my team was waiting to build something new together. And I knew then, no matter where the path starts, as long as you don't abandon yourself, the destination will always be worth it. My story isn't just about overcoming favoritism in a family. It's a testament to the power of perseverance and inner worth. I was once overlooked, pushed aside in my own celebration, but I chose to rise, not out of spite, but out of truth and dignity. Today, I no longer seek validation from those who once denied me, because I've found my place among those who truly believe in me, and more importantly, I've learned to believe in myself. What do you think about Stephanie's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it exactly what she deserved after everything she endured? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come. My name is Rebecca, I'm 31 years old, and I live and work in Chicago. I never imagined that a trip I thought would be filled with love would become the reason I could never see my family the same way again. It was a winter weekend morning, snow falling so heavily that the streetlights looked like faint glowing dots in the wind. I left at 6 a.m., driving over 8 hours through icy roads to a small town in Vermont where my family was throwing an engagement party for my sister, Caroline. In the passenger seat was a carefully wrapped wedding cake box. Quiet like a sweet secret, it was a 2-tier red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting, decorated with sugar flowers. Caroline once called it my high school dream. I had ordered the cake from a famous bakery nearly 2 weeks earlier and paid extra for it to be freshly made that morning. Not because I had time to spare, but because I loved my sister enough to trade comfort for her smile. I wore a fitted black dress, layered it with a beige coat, and changed into heels in a gas station restroom along the way. Every time I looked in the mirror, I told myself, I'm doing this for Caroline, because she's worth it. When my car turned onto the driveway of the estate hosting the party, I nearly lost my breath. The house glowed like a fairy tale in the snowy forest. Warm yellow lights wrapped around the trees, silver-white ribbons swayed gently in the wind. I remember whispering, "Caroline won't forget me after this." The words echoed inside the car like a fragile little prayer. I handed the keys to the valet. He raised an eyebrow when he saw me step out holding the cake box. "Are you with the wedding catering?" he asked, polite but distant. I smiled, relieved, thinking he was joking. "No, I'm the bride's sister." He nodded, said nothing more. I walked into the foyer, where the scent of vanilla candles mixed with soft violin music from inside. But strangely, no one came to greet me. No hug, no "how was the drive?" Just a few guests glancing my way and quickly looking away. Like I was a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. I held the cake box tightly and continued into the main hall, where Caroline stood beside her fiancé, Ethan, wearing an ivory satin dress, soft curls framing a face always praised as the family jewel. She was laughing brightly with her friends. Until she saw me. Caroline's smile vanished in an instant. "You actually came?" she asked, eyes narrowing like she couldn't believe it. 8 hours through heavy snow, of course I came. Surprise? I said, trying to keep my tone light. Caroline didn't take the cake box. She didn't step closer either. She just said, "I didn't think you'd come, with the weather and all." I'd placed the box beside a macaron tray, still trying to smile. "Well, it's your special day." Behind her, one of the bridesmaids whispered loudly enough, "She's not on the guest list, right?" I heard every word. My heart cracked. Caroline glanced at her but said nothing, then turned away. Seconds later, she leaned toward Ethan and walked off down the hallway. I stood there in my damp coat among unfamiliar faces. People passed me like I was a mismatched decoration. That was when I realized I wasn't an unexpected guest. I was a name crossed out, and maybe crossed out a long time ago. I decided to find my mother. If anyone could understand why I showed up, if anyone might see the effort I'd made, I still wanted to believe it was her. She stood near the fireplace, wearing a wine-red velvet dress, a silk scarf around her neck, holding a glass of white wine like a speaker ready to take the stage. As I approached, she looked over her shoulder, set the glass down, and didn't meet my eyes. "Rebecca," she said softly, as if afraid someone might hear. "I didn't think you'd actually come." "Why not?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "I messaged a week ago, no one replied, but I still hoped." She cut me off. Quickly, firmly. "Let's not make this complicated. Today is Caroline's day. Let's not turn it into something else." I gripped my purse strap. "What do you mean?" She sighed, turned fully toward me, offering a faint, polite smile. "I mean, you tend to draw a lot of attention. Let the event flow quietly. Don't become the center." I smiled, but there was no joy in it. I just drove almost 9 hours through snow to bring Caroline her favorite cake. I thought, that might mean something. "Rebecca," my mother said, her eyes colder than the winter wind. "Sometimes kindness is all about timing." Her words echoed in my head as I wandered around the hall. Soft jazz played in the background. People floated past me like wind. No one asked if I needed anything. No one asked if I was cold. In the center of the room was a photo display of Caroline and Ethan, each frame carefully chosen, walking hand in hand through Central Park, Caroline holding tulips in a white sweater, Ethan smiling as he proposed by the river. All perfect, and absolutely none of me. Not one picture. I went to the reception table where the guest list and seating chart were displayed. I scanned every name, every printed surname on ivory paper. Old college friends of Caroline, a woman our grandmother met twice at a charity gala, but not me. A staff member caught my glance. She smiled gently. "Excuse me, can I help you?" I pointed to the seating map. "I'm the bride's sister. I don't see my name." She checked the list carefully. "Rebecca Collins?" "Yeah." She bit her lip. "I'm sorry, maybe you're an unexpected guest?" "No, I'm family." She nodded slightly, then stepped back. I stood there, frozen inside. Around me, joyful wishes rang out like no one noticed I was unraveling. I found an empty chair near the dessert table, but before I could sit, another staff member approached. "Sorry," he said, gently but firmly. "That seat is for the DJ's assistant." I nodded, pressed my lips. "I understand." Then I walked to the dimmest corner of the room, where the lights faded and the laughter thinned. I poured myself a glass of water and held it with both hands like its cold could drown the emptiness in my chest. From there, I could see the slideshow on a giant screen. Pictures of Caroline's life from childhood to now. Her with ribbons in her hair, her winning the high school dance award, graduating college, traveling through Italy. Each moment carefully chosen. And I, her sister, was missing from every single one. Like I'd never existed in her life at all. A wave of cold washed over me, not from the snow outside, but from the realization of what I once called family. I stepped into the coat room, not to take off my coat, but to breathe. A narrow room with soft yellow lighting and crowded hangars became my only refuge from the storm of distant stares outside. On a small side table was a tray of bridesmaid gifts, 10 tiny boxes, each tied with pink ribbon. I glanced at the names. Julia, Erica, Claire, Hannah. Mine wasn't there. Not a mistake. They made sure of it. I sank into a velvet chair nearby, instinctively reaching for my phone. The screen lit up, no missed calls, no new messages. I opened my messaging app, scrolling for comfort. That's when I noticed it. A new group chat. Caroline's Dream Team. I frowned. I didn't remember joining this. Maybe someone added me by accident. The last message was from 3 hours ago, from Julia, one of the bridesmaids. Everything's pretty and perfect, just like we planned. Above it were earlier texts. Claire, she's definitely not coming. She hates crowds. Hannah, even better, the vibe will be lighter. Then I saw it. The one that broke me. Caroline. She doesn't fit the image. I'll just say the list is full. Having her in the wedding photos would be awkward. Below was a cringing emoji and a shaking head gif. I don't know how long I stared. Every word felt like it was carved straight into my chest. Caroline didn't just leave me out. She planned to leave me out. And the worst part was, I never suspected a thing. I left the group chat, slid my phone back into my purse, my hands trembling. Not from the cold. Not anymore. I stepped out of the coat room, no destination in mind, just needing to escape those walls closing in. While searching for an exit, I wandered into a narrow hallway between the kitchen and staff area. There, under dim yellow ceiling lights, trays of untouched food waited to be brought out. I was about to turn back when I heard laughter from behind a cracked door, a voice so familiar it made me freeze. It was Caroline. I still can't believe she actually drove all the way here. Who does that? Then Hannah's voice. A whole road trip just to bring, what? A homemade cake that looks like it's from a discount store? Laughter burst out. I froze, held my breath. Caroline continued, her voice lower but no less cutting. If she hadn't come, everything would have been perfect. I was hoping the weather would keep her away. Claire chimed in. Maybe she would have spun out on the road or something. That way, we'd have an excuse to be sad and still enjoy the peace. This time, it wasn't just a laugh. It was an eruption of laughter, light, ruthless, and all too familiar. The kind of laughter I'd heard my entire childhood, only back then, I didn't know who it was aimed at. Now, I did. I stepped back, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. The floor felt like it tilted, not because I lost my balance, but because the whole world had just collapsed. None of them thought I could hear, and that's what hurt the most. Because what people say behind your back, that's what they really mean. And the truth was, I had never been wanted here. I turned away. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time, I knew this much. I wasn't mistaken. I wouldn't excuse them anymore through blind hope. I had heard everything. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to forgive. And returned to the main hall. There was no reason to stay in a place where even breathing made my chest ache. Instead, I quietly stepped out through the side door near the kitchen, my long coat still streaked with old snow from that morning's drive. The cold wind whipped against my face like it was trying to wash away every illusion I had brought with me. But the coldest thing wasn't the weather. It was the silence from the people I once called family. I sat in my car for a long time, The engine was off, but my mind kept racing. My phone lit up with a new message. It was from my mother. Just one line. "Rebecca, don't make a scene." I stared at the text, mind blank. Above it, my earlier message still sat. "Mom, I'm on my way. Hope you'll all be surprised." Marked as read. No reply. I didn't respond. I had no energy left to explain or defend something that never should have needed explanation. I just wanted to be there for my sister. I sat in that darkness until the golden lights from the estate across the road disappeared into nightfall. I didn't drive home that night. I booked a room at a cheap motel 30 minutes away. My dress was wrinkled, makeup smeared after countless attempts not to cry. I didn't turn on the TV. Didn't check social media. I just lay there, staring at the stained ceiling, letting the memory of the evening drain me one breath at a time. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. My head was still spinning from lack of sleep. When I opened Instagram, the first post was from Caroline. A heavily filtered photo. Caroline surrounded by her bridesmaids holding a champagne glass, soft light glowing against her satin dress. Twinkling lights behind them, just like the fairy tale wedding invites. The caption read, "A perfect night with all the people I love most." I wasn't in the photo. No tag, no mention, no thank you. Not a single trace that I had ever been there. I scrolled through the comments. "Caroline, the most beautiful bride. Everything looks amazing. Wish I'd been invited." No one asked about me. No one wondered about the wedding cake, about the person who drove over 400 miles to show up, then vanished without a trace. The next message came from my cousin, Julia. "Rebecca, last night wasn't easy. But I hope you understand, that party wasn't the place to ask for attention." Then another text from my mother, this time in the family group chat, family group Collins. "She's going through a rough patch, let's be patient. Don't add fuel to the fire." I read it over and over, as if my brain needed multiple passes to fully understand. Rough patch. They were rewriting the story. A new version of Rebecca. Unhinged, disruptive, embarrassing. No one mentioned what I'd heard behind that kitchen door. No one asked why I left in silence. No one asked if I was okay. A message from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in nearly 3 years, came in. "Heard the engagement party got awkward. Caroline said you caused a scene and disappeared. You all right?" I didn't reply. Because I understood. I hadn't just been erased from the guest list. I'd been erased from the narrative. Like my presence was a glitch needing to be edited out. Like I had never been the main character in anyone's memory. Just an extra. Easily cut to preserve the perfect picture. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and titled it, "The Truth." In it, I saved photos of the wedding cake receipt, the untouched cake box on the kitchen counter, the snow-covered driveway from yesterday. I saved screenshots of the group chat between Caroline and her friends. But I didn't know exactly why I did it. But maybe one day, if someone ever asks, was it really that bad? I want to be able to say, yes. These are the things they'll never tell you. They could erase me from the party. They could crop me out of the photos. But I wasn't going to let them define me with silence anymore. I spent all Sunday afternoon in my small Chicago apartment, soft light from the window falling across the kitchen table, where I laid out everything others had chosen to ignore. My laptop was open, the screen showing the folder labeled "The Truth," where I'd saved the things no one wanted to acknowledge. A photo of the red velvet wedding cake I brought, still sealed in its silver box, never opened. A receipt for over $200, 0 cents, paid in advance for the bakery to prepare it fresh that morning. A selfie I took in front of Caroline's estate, hair messy from the snowstorm, coat soaked through, still clutching the cake like a precious gift. I opened Instagram. The first photo I posted was of the cake outdoors, snow all around it, the gold ribbon standing out against the white. The caption read, "Not everything we bring is appreciated. That doesn't mean it has no value." The second post was the receipt, screenshot from the email confirmation. The note reading, 2-tier red velvet wedding cake. to be delivered Saturday morning for Caroline Collins. The third was a photo from inside my car, windshield covered in snow, everything outside blurred white, like the sky itself had tried to stop me, and I came anyway. I turned off the comments, not because I feared conflict, but because I didn't need permission to tell my story. Then I opened my email. Recipients: Mom, Linda Collins; Aunt Martha, Caroline Collins. Subject: the wedding cake. I kept it brief. Attached is the receipt for the wedding cake I ordered, paid for, and brought on Saturday. The cake was never opened, never mentioned. I don't need thanks. I just want you to see the truth. I attached the 3 photos and hit send. Mom replied in less than 5 minutes. Rebecca, this isn't helping. You're making things worse. And I didn't respond. I opened a new message, this time addressed to the PR department of Lockridge Financial, where Ethan Caroline's fiancé worked. I wasn't sure if they'd care, but I knew one thing. This firm cared deeply about reputation and stayed far away from personal scandals that could affect investor confidence. I didn't write much. I simply attached 2 files. A screenshot of the family group Collins chat, where my mother called me unstable and Caroline mocked me for turning this into a tragedy. A recording from that night, the one where Caroline and her friends laughed about the idea of me getting into an accident on the way. The voices were clear, sharp, unmistakable. Subject: information that may be relevant to company image. No caption, no explanation. I left it for them to decide. When it was done, I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking, not out of fear of their reaction, but because for the first time I had done it. I pushed back. No yelling, no pleading to be included, just the truth, laid bare, to see if they'd still pretend not to know. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Rebecca, this is Lindsay from PR at Lockridge. Thank you for sharing the information. We are reviewing the content and will proceed according to company policy. I didn't know what would happen next, but the fact that they responded, something my own family hadn't done, was enough to tell me. This time, they couldn't bury it. That night, Caroline posted an Instagram story. A short video clip of flickering candles, with text across the screen. There's always someone who can't stand to see you happy. No name, no tags. But everyone knew who it was about. I just smiled and closed my phone. I didn't need to reply with words, because this time they had written the play, and I was only the one who pulled back the curtain so the audience could see backstage. On Wednesday morning, while I was making coffee, a text came in from Monica, an old childhood friend who lived near Caroline. Did you hear? The family meet and greet dinner got canceled. Ethan said he needs to reevaluate everything. I stood still in the kitchen. The smell of coffee couldn't cover the shake in my wrist. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt that the truth had finally knocked on the right door. The weekend brunch at Aunt Martha's house went on as planned. A little gathering to smooth things over, as Mom had put it. I was invited reluctantly, like a side dish people only served because the hotel already included it in the menu. I arrived 10 minutes late, not because of traffic, but because I wanted to see every face as I walked in, to know who was waiting for me to speak and who was praying I'd stay silent. Caroline sat at the center of the long table, wearing a cream knit dress, lightly made up, but the fatigue beneath her mascara was impossible to hide. Ethan wasn't there. Mom offered a stiff smile. Aunt Hartha let out a breath of relief. I nodded silently and took my assigned seat at the far end of the table, next to a vase of white tulips. Caroline spoke first, as always, her voice sweet with a hint of reflection. This past week has been an emotional journey. I think we've all seen where the strength of family truly lies. Heads nodded around the table. Everyone knew what she meant. And who she meant. I set my water glass down, wiped the rim with a napkin and looked up. I'd like to say a few words too. Caroline paused. Rebecca, today isn't. Just 1 minute, I said, calm but firm. I took out my phone, opened the saved audio clip, and hit play. Caroline's voice rang out, clear but ice cold. She doesn't fit the image. I'll just say the list is full. Having her in the wedding photos would be awkward. Laughter followed, then Julia's voice. Maybe she'll spin out on the road, that way we'd have a reason to be sad, and peace, too. The room was full, but completely silent. Only their own words played back through the small speaker, each sentence like a verdict. Caroline turned pale. My mother set down her glass, her composure gone. Aunt Martha covered her mouth. No more nods now. I stopped the recording after 10 seconds. Enough. That's what I heard at Caroline's engagement party, I said, my voice oddly steady. I thought I came with a gift, with love. But I was just an inconvenience to be hidden. Caroline stood. Rebecca, that was a joke, I interrupted. A careless moment? Or a plan all along? No one answered. I looked straight at my mother, then at Aunt Martha. If I didn't have that recording, would any of you believe me? My mother said nothing. Her eyes drifted away. Does Ethan know? A relative asked, clearly uneasy. Caroline swallowed. He needs time to think. I nodded. Good. He should know who he's marrying. I didn't wait for a response. I stood, gently pushed the chair back in, and looked around the table. At the faces that once turned away at the party, now watching me like they were seeing me for the first time. As I walked out the door, Aunt Martha followed. She touched my arm and whispered, "Or you didn't just stand up for yourself. You reminded this family that the truth still deserves a voice." I just nodded and stepped into the bright morning sun. Above, the clouds were parting, revealing a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. For the first time in years, I felt no need to explain myself. Because this time, they had said it all. A week had passed since that brunch, and my phone remained completely silent. No apologies, no check-ins, just a few Instagram notifications from old friends liking the post of the wedding cake I had brought through the snowstorm, and a handful of quiet messages from people who, like me, had once been pushed aside by their families. I didn't try to reach out to Caroline. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt empty. As if a long chapter had closed, with no tragic ending, no need for resolution, just done. On Friday night, while folding laundry, my phone rang. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Caroline. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the decline button, then stopped. Finally, I set the phone on the table, hit accept, and put it on speaker. Rebecca, her voice was hoarse. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but please, just once. I said nothing. I was wrong, Caroline continued, each word sounding like it was fighting its way through icy water. My whole life, people compared me to you. You were independent, smart, never needed anyone. And I always had to work harder just to be seen. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. I never thought I'd hear this from Caroline. I was jealous of you, she admitted plainly. Even at my own engagement party, I felt scared. Scared of how Ethan looked at you when you walked in. Scared of people praising you for driving through a snowstorm. Scared that once again, I'd be the shadow. I closed my eyes. The familiar ache returned. Not because of her words, but because I'd once wished to hear them so much sooner. But that doesn't excuse what I did, Caroline said, her voice cracking. It was selfish and cowardly. I left you off the guest list, laughed behind your back, then spun a story that made you the problem. I know. Nothing can undo that. I exhaled slowly and replied, You're right. Nothing can undo it. But I also don't want to carry those scars forever. There was a pause. Then Caroline asked, barely above a whisper, Can you forgive me? I thought about it. Forgiveness didn't mean starting over. It didn't mean stepping into the same circle again. I don't hate you, Caroline, I said honestly. But I can't go back to the way things were. Some relationships need to end for both sides to grow. Caroline didn't respond. We just sat in silence, breathing on opposite ends of a broken bridge. Then she said goodbye. Not tearful, not dramatic. Just an ending that arrived right on time. The next day I went to the local bakery, the same one where I had ordered the red velvet cake. The shop owner remembered me and smiled when she saw me walk in. "What'll it be this time?" she asked. I smiled gently. "Just a small cake, vanilla frosting, simple design, no message, just sweet and honest." That evening, I placed the cake in the center of my kitchen table, lit a small candle, not for a birthday, not for an anniversary, just to mark a moment when I chose myself over trying to please anyone else. I poured a cup of hot tea, sliced a piece of cake, and sat by the window, watching light snow fall outside. In my hand was my phone, already open to a draft. After countless edits, I was finally ready to post the final message. To anyone who's ever felt like the extra in their own family story: you're not wrong. You're not too sensitive. You're just being real, and that has never been something to apologize for. I once walked through a snowstorm to bring the best of myself, and I left empty-handed. But I'm no longer sorry, because now I know. Family isn't made by blood. It's built on mutual choice. And I've finally chosen me. I hit post. No waiting, no fear, just relief, like setting down a weight I'd carried for too long. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Not out of anxiety, not out of lingering sadness, just because there was nothing to hide from anymore. The winter light slipped gently through the curtains, softer than I expected. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the thin sheet of ice still clinging to the street. I wasn't thinking much about what Caroline had said the night before, not because I forgot, but because I no longer needed to keep it in my head like a wound. For the first time in years, my mind felt like it had room to breathe. A few hours later, I received a message from a former coworker. "Melissa, I read your post. I went through something similar with my cousin. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Then another from someone I'd known in college. "You're not alone. Family isn't always the safest place." All morning, my inbox filled with messages from people who had once been silent when I needed to be seen. Now, when I no longer waited for anyone's approval, my voice had somehow helped others feel seen too. It was something I never expected. That my story, which once felt small and misplaced, could reach so many. And I realized, sometimes silence isn't peace. It's quiet erasure. The silence from Caroline, from Mom, from those who saw me sitting alone at that party and turned away, it wasn't because they didn't know what was happening. It was because they chose not to acknowledge me, because I made them uncomfortable, because I didn't fit the narrative they wanted to present. And I had been silent too long. I was afraid that if I spoke up, I'd be seen as the troublemaker, the too emotional daughter, the one who ruined the mood. But the truth is, that so-called peace was never meant for me. The moment I spoke, hit post, played the audio, sent the email, that's when I stopped being the victim in someone else's story. I became the one writing it over. Telling the truth doesn't make you bad, it sets you free. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will applaud. Some family members quietly unfollowed me. Didn't message, didn't call. But for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to. I didn't need anyone to confirm I was right, to know I wasn't wrong. That afternoon, I walked to the bakery. Not to buy another cake, but to thank the owner for the quiet kindness she gave when my own family couldn't. She smiled and didn't ask questions, only said, "When you first came in, I had a feeling that cake wasn't just for celebration." I nodded. It was the last gift I brought to a door that had already closed. On the walk home, snow started to fall. Gently, steadily. Not harsh, not bitter, just soft, like it was laying down a fresh layer of clean white over everything. I stopped in the middle of the street, tilted my face toward the sky, and thought, not every storm comes to destroy. Some come only to clear the sky. And I had walked through a storm like that. That night, I pulled out the old journal I had set aside when I was 26. I turned to the first page, where I had once written, "Maybe if I'm gentle enough, they'll let me stay." I smiled and gently crossed out that line with a blue ink pen, then wrote a new one just below it. "No one has the right to keep or cast someone out if that person has chosen to walk forward in their own truth." I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and left a small candle burning quietly in the corner of the kitchen. And for the first time in a very long while, I slept deeply. No dreams, no jolts awake, no voices echoing in my mind. Only peace, not from forgetting, but from finally facing everything and letting go. Rebecca's story isn't just about leaving a party, it's about returning to herself. From someone who always tried to be accepted by a family that never truly listened, she found the courage to speak up, face the pain, and release old expectations. Rebecca shows us that the truth, even when hard to hear, always deserves to be spoken. And sometimes, the strongest thing we can do isn't to forgive, but to no longer need someone in order to be at peace. What do you think about Rebecca's choice? Would you dare to speak up if your own family shut you out? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life. My name is Melissa Carter. I'm 58 years old, and until that fateful afternoon, I was the head of compliance at Westbridge Systems 1, one of the largest electronics manufacturing firms in the Midwest. I had worked there for nearly 3 decades, exactly 28 years and 361 days. I knew every corner of the operation, every financial report, every irregularity, because I was the one responsible for making sure everything ran by the book, to standard, with nothing overlooked. My office was on the 8th floor, almost entirely separate from the technical and admin wings. Quiet, sunlit, and so impeccably organized that people used to jokingly call it the truth box. I've always believed that integrity is the last thing you hold on to, when everything else gets swept away. That Wednesday afternoon, it was lightly raining. I was finishing up the Q2 internal audit checklist when the admin assistant walked in and handed me a slip of paper. "The CEO wants to see you, 10th floor conference room, right now." I looked up. "Was this scheduled?" "No, but he said you'd understand." "Why?" My heart sank slightly. In almost 30 years at Westbridge, I'd never been summoned to the 10th floor without an appointment. That floor wasn't for casual meetings. It was where big decisions, or irreversible ones, were made. I walked into the conference room, where Walter Grant, the recently appointed CEO just under a year into the job, was already waiting. He was the kind of man whose soft voice somehow sent a chill. On the table sat a slim leather folder, positioned with such precision it made me wary. "Melissa," he smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. "How long have you been with us?" I kept my voice steady. 28 years and 361 days. Nearly 3 decades. That's admirable. He nodded and gently slid the folder toward me. "Unfortunately, today will be your last." I looked at him, saying nothing. I didn't need to open the folder to know what this was. "Staff reduction," he said, almost like an exhale. "Operating costs are tightening. The board had to make some tough calls." I didn't react. I just listened. Every word he spoke felt like an icy blade. Not because it surprised me, but because of how calculated it was. I knew the truth. Next Monday, just 3 days away, all my retirement benefits, everything I'd worked my life to earn, would fully vest. 3 days. I stared at him, eyes unflinching. "So, this is final." Walter hesitated, perhaps caught off guard by my calm. "I know this is hard to accept, but I hope you'll sign the severance agreement. It's fairly generous, given the circumstances. I didn't touch the folder. I stood. Thank you for informing me. He looked surprised. Maybe he was used to tears, begging, panic, but not from me. I'd reviewed thousands of lines of data over the years. I knew when something smelled rotten. And that room reeked. I left the 10th floor and stepped into the elevator like someone waking up from a long dream. The fluorescent light above flickered softly. I thought, I've always prepared for the worst, but not for betrayal. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a firing. This was a calculated strike, a plan designed to erase my life's work without leaving a trace. I returned to my office in silence, the glass door clicking shut behind me like a cold full stop. Inside, everything was the same. The weekly planner, my half-drunk coffee, the file I'd been reviewing. But I knew, after today, nothing would be the same. On the desk sat the folder Walter had given me, as if someone had already placed it there. Bold print on the cover, internal severance agreement. I flipped through a few pages. My eyes stopped at clause 12. The employee agrees to waive any right to sue, dispute, or pursue financial claims, including but not limited to pensions and accrued dividends from the time of signing. I set it down, calm. Everything was clear. They weren't cutting budgets. They were cutting me out. A plan, calculated down to the hour, the day. If I signed before 5 p.m. tomorrow, I'd get 3 months' pay. If I didn't, nothing. No pension, no insurance, no proof of 28 years of service. I picked up the phone and called Kelly, our HR assistant. Melissa! Her voice shrank when she heard mine. Just one question, I said gently. How many others were let go today? A pause. Just you, ma'am. I gave a faint smile. I see. I hung up before she could say more. My hand tightened around the phone, not from fear, but from clarity. This was a personal elimination, and I was the target. I packed in silence. A photo of my late husband, Henry, gone 8 years now from a long illness. The ceramic mug my daughter gave me on my 50th birthday, scribbled with, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." And the framed certificate honoring my 25 years of service, the one they now wanted me to forget like a spilled ink stain. I left the building, escorted by a security guard I didn't even know. He said nothing except, "Have a good afternoon." The rain had stopped. I sat in my car for a long time, listening to the wipers push away the last drops. My mind wasn't chaotic like I thought it would be. Instead, I felt sharply awake. I drove home through familiar streets, past the bookstore Henry and I used to visit every weekend, past the coffee shop where I met my book club friends. There was a creeping sense of loss. But I wouldn't let it swallow me, not today. The moment I stepped inside, I poured a glass of water and sat at my desk. I opened Walter's folder, laid out every document, and photographed each page. I wasn't going to sign, but I was going to document every word, every timestamp, every phrase, even the handwritten note from Walter on the final page. I hope you understand. This is best for everyone. Best for whom? I opened the safe in the corner of my study and pulled out a file I'd kept for 4 years. Memos, emails, copies of financial reports I'd archived whenever something felt off. I had suspected but never confirmed, until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I discovered a shipment worth over $3 million. 0 cents had been sent without any valid inspection certifications. When I asked, I got a chilling reply from management. "Don't complicate things, Melissa. Just trust that the system is working." And now that system had moved to remove me. I'm not someone who seeks confrontation, but I believe in truth. And this time, the truth wasn't in that severance packet. It was in the numbers they tried to bury. I opened my laptop, typed in my password, and began an email. Recipient: Andrew F. Walters. An old friend, former investigator with the Office of the Inspector General, now a special advisor at the Treasury Department. Subject: urgent, internal, concerns at Westbridge Systems. I don't know what will happen after this email, but I know one thing. They tried to silence me, and they picked the wrong person. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because my mind wouldn't stop working. I sat in my study, the soft yellow desk lamp casting light over years' worth of carefully sorted and marked documents. Someone once asked why I kept everything so meticulously. I always said, occupational habit. But deep down, I had known something wasn't right for a long time. Westbridge Systems was never a perfect company, but ever since leadership changed in my 24th year there, something had started to go murky. Temporary expenses, adjustments in quarterly revenue reports, and last-minute approval requests late in the workday. None of it felt coincidental anymore. I opened the safe again, not to double-check documents this time, but to find an old business card I had tucked away in a leather notebook. Henry's anniversary gift to me on our 20th year together. The card was slightly faded. Jonathan Miles, Senior Investigator, SEC Chicago Division. Jonathan had worked on a joint project with Westbridge 7 years ago. Back then, he was an external auditor. Kind, but sharp as a blade. We'd clashed over a few reports, but I respected how he never compromised with loopholes. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, and stopped at one name. Miles, SEC. I wasn't sure if he still used the number, but I called anyway. After 3 rings, a deep and tired male voice answered. Hello? Jonathan, it's me, Melissa Carter. A pause, then a soft chuckle. I figured I'd never hear your voice again. What's going on, Melissa? Are you still with the SEC? I'm an independent investigative consultant now, but I still collaborate on special cases. Why? I took a deep breath. I need to talk. Something serious is happening at Westbridge, and I have proof. His tone shifted instantly. What kind of proof are we talking about? The kind that could keep a boardroom up at night. I need to meet with you, as soon as possible. We arranged to meet the next morning at a law office in suburban Evanston, a place discreet enough to stay under the radar, but formal enough for me to safely present everything. That morning, I wore a light gray suit, the one I saved for board meetings. I brought 3 file binders organized by year, along with a backup USB drive, encrypted. Jonathan was already there. He no longer had the thick brown hair I remembered, but the sharpness in his eyes hadn't faded. When I laid the folders on the table, he stared at me for a moment before asking, his voice more serious than it had been the night before. Are you sure you want to go through with this, Melissa? If this is what you say it is, we're not talking about an isolated case. This would trigger a federal investigation. I nodded without hesitation. I don't want to. But they left me no choice. For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything. Emails, reports, timelines. From requests to align data with media strategy, to backdated quality certifications, to vague representation expenses, with no documented destination. When I finished, Jonathan leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the pile in front of him. They terminated you before your retirement kicked in, didn't they? 3 days before, I said flatly. He nodded. That's the dumbest thing they've ever done, and it might be what brings their entire system down. I said nothing, but inside I knew. This was the point of no return. Jonathan continued. I'm sending this directly to the Office of Special Investigations in D.C. I'll need you to stay in close contact. And Melissa? Don't sign anything, no matter how many times they call. I nodded. I won't sign. I spent nearly 3 decades doing things by the book. I won't let them take it all away with a trap disguised as paperwork. When I left the office, the sun was high. A soft breeze lifted my hair, and I felt lighter than I had in days. Not because anything was resolved, but because, finally, I had acted. And this time, the truth wouldn't be brushed aside again. Monday morning, I arrived at the Federal Building in downtown Chicago, where Jonathan had arranged a meeting with the SEC investigation team. I brought 3 boxes of documents and a hard drive containing over 1,000 pages of evidence. Everything cataloged by timeline and severity. Every note, every email, every signed report. Preserved because I had a gut feeling this day would come. The investigative team was waiting in a glass-walled conference room, the bright white lighting reflecting off dry erase boards lining the walls. Alongside Jonathan were 2 others. Lisa Moreno, lead counsel for internal investigations, and Brent Hutchins, financial data analyst, his face as serious as if every number was a red flag. "Let me be clear," Lisa began after a handshake. "From this moment on, everything you share with us becomes part of a formal federal investigation. It cannot be withdrawn. Are you sure you want to proceed, Melissa?" I nodded firmly. "I've already lost everything. They didn't give me any other option." Jonathan opened the first box, flipping through documents with laser focus. Brent connected the hard drive to his laptop, scanning the files I had organized. Falsified revenue reports, executive emails pushing for inflated profit margins, personal logs of suspicious meetings. Within 30 minutes, the room was silent. Just the sounds of keystrokes, pages turning, and the occasional sigh. Brent looked up first, locking eyes with me. "Do you realize what you've brought us?" "All I know is those numbers aren't honest. And I can't keep pretending not to see it." Lisa nodded slowly. "Westbridge inflated revenue by at least 18% over the past 2 years. Your files match internal tax filings we've had concerns about. But what interests me most is what happened before David Langston arrived." I nodded and slid another binder toward her. "The misconduct didn't start with Langston, he just took it further, but the earliest signs began under the previous CEO, Harold Brantley." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I've heard that name. Brantley left quietly, no questions asked. But it sounds like we need to revisit everything." I turned to an old email thread, exchanges between Brantley and the former head of finance requesting a minor adjustment to quarterly numbers to maintain shareholder confidence. Brent stared at the screen. "This isn't short-term fraud. This is a systematic financial misrepresentation strategy." Lisa closed the binder. "We'll be issuing a formal inquiry to Westbridge's executive board immediately. We'll also contact the regional U.S. Attorney's office. But Melissa," she paused, locking eyes with me, "you'll need legal counsel. And from this point on, do not contact anyone at Westbridge directly. All communication will go through us." "I understand," I said, voice calm but resolute. "I'm not going back there." Jonathan stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing. I know this isn't easy. But from now on, you're not alone." As I left the building, April sunlight lit the granite steps beneath my feet. People hurried past, unaware that a middle-aged woman had just launched one of the largest financial investigations in the Midwest's manufacturing industry. I don't know what lies ahead, but I know one thing: the silence is over. 3 days after that meeting with the SEC team, my phone started ringing non-stop from early morning. Unknown numbers, no voicemails. I didn't answer. I knew exactly where those calls were coming from. By late morning, an email popped up in my personal inbox. Urgent. Letter from the Westbridge Systems Executive Board. I opened it, and just the first line told me everything was starting to shift. "Dear Ms. Melissa Carter, we hereby inform you that the decision to terminate your employment on the 17th has been fully revoked. You are reinstated as a full employee, along with all associated benefits, including your pension and insurance program." Just beneath that, in faint italics, "We would also like to discuss with you a potential special advisory role during the upcoming restructuring phase." I sat still for a few minutes, not because I was surprised, but because of how pitifully they were managing the crisis. There was no apology, not a single line admitting wrongdoing. Just damage control dressed up as goodwill. I called my attorney, Donna Reynolds, A sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 60s who never trusted anything that came with a friendly handshake. I read the email aloud to her. She scoffed. Do they really think you'd be thrilled and jump right back in? They're trying to save face, I replied. They know the SEC is digging. And they're desperate, Donna said, because they know you can bring down their entire structure. We agreed not to respond immediately. Instead, Donna sent a brief legal notice. Miss Melissa Carter will not participate in any discussions without her legal counsel and independent investigative representatives present. That afternoon, a member of the board, Mr. Russell McMahon, called my landline at home. He didn't leave a message. When I picked up, he kept it short. Melissa, I hope you understand. We were just following protocol. No one on the board truly wanted you gone. We were under pressure. I cut him off. Pressure from whom, Mr. Russell? From yourself? Or from the man your board voted to install? We should speak in person. About a mutually beneficial arrangement. I paused, then answered firmly. I'll meet. But not at your offices. And I'm not coming alone. 2 days later, the meeting took place at a neutral law office in Chicago. I came with Donna and a representative from the SEC, just as we had stipulated. Their side included 3 people. Russell, the head of legal, and David Langston. The man who cost me my career now sat across from me, looking tired, his neatly combed hair unable to hide the tension of dealing with media storms and mounting investigations. Russell spoke first. We regret that things unfolded this way. Miss Carter, the board wishes to make amends. We'd like to offer you a consulting role, double the salary, remote work, full scheduling autonomy. I'm not here to negotiate employment. I cut him off. I'm here to be clear. I'm not signing any gag order. I'm not returning in exchange for silence. I want a full investigation, and public, if necessary. David looked at me, his eyes vacant. Maybe he never believed I'd have the courage to bring it all into the light. Melissa, this doesn't have to go that far. You took away 28 years of my career with one signature, I said. If you think I'll come back and pretend like nothing happened, you've clearly underestimated me. Donna slid a document across the table, prepared by the SEC. A list of 17 formal requests requiring Westbridge's official response, including full budget approval processes, 5 years of financial reports, and all meetings involving revenue adjustment strategies. None of the 3 dared to sign on the spot. You're not willing to cooperate with the board to resolve this internally? Russell asked one last time, a mix of desperation and arrogance in his tone. I tried to do that for 4 years, I answered without hesitation. But when I needed the board, no one spoke up. Now it's time I let the truth speak for itself. I stood, left the room, and didn't look back at their uneasy faces. I wasn't after revenge. I just wanted the truth to come out. And now, the wheels of justice were in motion. And wouldn't stop, just because of a few hollow promises. 3 days after that tense meeting, I sat quietly in my home office, unlocking my personal safe. There was one file I hadn't handed over to the SEC. Not because I forgot, but because I was waiting for the right moment. And now, with Westbridge showing signs of panic, that moment had arrived. The file had a red label, handwritten in black ink. Internal correspondence, Q3 and Q4 Brantley era. Inside were printed emails between Harold Brantley, former CEO of Westbridge, and 3 board members from that time, Russell McMahon, Linda Rowe, and Carlton Daniels. The contents didn't just show that they were aware of report adjustment tactics. They revealed they were directly instructing the finance department to legitimize fictitious revenue. One attachment from the former head accountant even suggested allocating unrealized profits to the current quarter to maintain shareholder confidence. I sent the entire file to Jonathan and Lisa with a short note. I think it's time we complete the full picture. Jonathan called me almost immediately. Melissa, this isn't just adding fuel to the fire, this is the match. And I'd say, I replied calmly, it's time to strike it. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. But I didn't need to. Over 10 financial news sites ran the headline. expands investigation into Westbridge systems. Board members implicated. Investors demand transparency, and Westbridge stock plunged 30%. The next morning, the Wall Street Bulletin devoted its front page to the story. The bold headline read, "Whistleblower at 58 Melissa Carter and the fight for truth." They didn't call me a victim. They called me the one who stood up. By noon, 4 Westbridge executives submitted their resignations. Russell, Linda, and Carlton among them, the same names found in the documents I'd just released. The fourth was Doris Meeks, Director of Communications, who had overseen the PR team's efforts to craft a narrative of positive recovery. I heard the news in a call from Donna, her voice carrying a smile. "You did what an entire external audit committee couldn't. Brought down a crumbling power structure from the inside." "And David Langston?" I asked. Donna paused, then said, "Officially terminated this morning. No severance, no honors, no farewell." I didn't celebrate. I simply stepped out onto the back porch and sat on the wooden chair Henry once built. A soft May breeze moved through my hair, carrying the scent of change, the scent of truth finally stepping out of the shadows. The media kept digging. Major investors demanded direct talks with the SEC. Some proposed a class action suit for a prolonged lack of transparency resulting in financial losses. A partner bank announced it was suspending all cooperation until the investigation concluded. Westbridge, once seen as a symbol of stability in the Midwest manufacturing sector, was now scrambling to salvage what little reputation it had left. Jonathan texted me. "They're trying to save the building, but the foundation's already rotted." I replied, "Then at least let them clean up the rubble the right way. This story is no longer about me. It's become a message, a wake-up call to those who believed silence would always serve power. And I, a 58-year-old woman once cast out for telling the truth, am now living proof that the opposite is just as powerful." The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in years, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer alone. 6 months after I walked out of that law office with the final batch of evidence, I sat in a federal courtroom, facing the other side of the long table covered in blue felt. David Langston entered first. Same expensive suit, same arrogant stride, but this time, his eyes didn't dart around. They were simply empty. Behind him came Carlton Daniels and Linda Rowe, 2 of the 3 board members who used to smile at me during quarterly meetings. They said nothing, walking in quietly like forgotten pawns at the end of a chess game. And then they sat, together, in the defendant's seats. The judge read the charges: securities fraud, falsifying financial statements, and withholding material information from investors. The evidence gathered by the SEC, including the documents I provided, left no room for doubt. In front of federal prosecutors, reporters, and major investors, all 3 admitted to their wrongdoing. There were no outbursts, no justifications. I looked at David, the man who had cast me aside like I was just another name on a layoff list. Our eyes met for a fleeting second, just long enough for me to see it. Not guilt, but defeat. After the hearing, I was brought into a private office to receive official notice from the CCC. Lisa, who had led the investigation from the very beginning, gave me a quiet smile and handed me a thick envelope, along with a document sealed in red. Whistleblower Award. Under SEC Whistleblower Protection Provisions. I opened it and could hardly believe my eyes. 15% of the total fines collected from the case. Enough to live the rest of my life without worrying about insurance, medical bills, or retirement. Donna, my attorney, stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You saw it through. Now it's time to rebuild, on your terms." That evening, I sat in the warm kitchen of the lakeside cabin I had moved into after everything settled. This was the home Henry and I once dreamed of, though we never got the chance to make it real. Until now, I had turned it into reality. A quiet place, where golden afternoon light spilled through the windows, waves lapped gently on the shore, and memories of the only man who ever told me, "Your attention to detail isn't a weakness, it's your superpower." And I decided to do something in his name. 3 months later, the Henry Carter Scholarship Fund was officially established. Its goal, to support women pursuing careers in ethics and corporate compliance fields, often dismissed as dull or unglamorous, yet which I believe are the moral backbone of any economic system. The launch ceremony was small but dignified, held at my alma mater. As I stepped up to speak and saw the faces of young students smiling at me with admiration, I felt something I hadn't in nearly 3 decades. I hadn't been pushed out of the old world. I was opening a new door for the next one. My story didn't end with a verdict or a payout. It continued through scholarship letters from young women saying they wanted to stand up for transparency. Notes of gratitude from single mothers, or from a Latina student who said she never thought she could study finance until she read my story. I was no longer Melissa fired 3 days before retirement. I was Melissa Carter, the woman who chose not to stay silent. And that, I knew, would outlast any court case, any number, any corporation. And on quiet afternoons, when my granddaughter runs giggling through the yard and laughter echoes through the pine trees, I smile quietly. Because I didn't let my life end with a period. I turned it into a reminder. The truth can be buried, but it never disappears. 1 week after the trial ended, I received a FedEx envelope from Westbridge Systems. Inside was a 3-page letter printed on gold-trimmed letterhead, signed by interim CEO Patricia Donovan. On behalf of the new board, she offered a sincere apology and invited me to return as a strategic ethics advisor with full schedule flexibility, a private office, and an unlimited compensation package. I read every line, folded the letter, and placed it in the drawer where I'd once kept my very first employee badge from 28 years ago. Not out of nostalgia, but because I understood. A chapter had ended, and I didn't need to go back to know I had done the right thing. I sent back a short, polite, but firm reply. I am not seeking titles or compensation. What I needed, I have already received. Not from the company, but from my conscience. I will not return. I wish you well in rebuilding a kinder Westbridge. Afterward, I began working with the SEC in several legislative organizations, joining advisory teams on whistleblower protection policy at both state and federal levels. We discussed ways to expand legal support, streamline response protocols, and, most importantly, prevent the kind of subtle retaliation I endured. At 59, for the first time, I was sitting on the other side of the table, not to defend, but to decide. At a policy conference in Washington, D.C., a young compliance officer approached me, eyes brimming with emotion. I was thinking of quitting after discovering misconduct at my company, she said. But then I read about you, and I realized, speaking up isn't destruction, it's repair. Thank you for not backing down. I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't the first, I replied. I'm just one of many who stopped being afraid. Now it's your turn. The rest of the week, I live quietly in my Michigan lakeside cabin, Henry's dream retirement spot with me. In the mornings, I brew coffee and sit on the porch, watching the sun rise over the still water. In the evenings, I walk with my granddaughter, listening to her talk about school and how she dreams of becoming a therapist, so people who feel unheard will finally be listened to. Every weekend, my daughter Rachel visits with her husband and kids. The little ones play in the yard while we gather around the grill, stitching memories together, laughing more than crying. Rachel once told me, "Mom, you're not just a symbol of integrity. You taught me how to stand tall, even when the wind is against you." And I know that's the greatest reward I've ever received. Sometimes the media still brings up my story, in business ethics panels or policy reform reports. One magazine once called me the woman who made the system stop and look at itself. But I never let that title pull me away from real life. I'm still Melissa Carter, the woman who quietly checked every number, every report, and who, when something was wrong, refused to look away. Once, during a national radio interview, the host asked me, "If you could go back, would you stay silent to stay safe?" I answered without hesitation. I lost my job, nearly lost my reputation, and faced a long season of loneliness. But if I had to do it again, I'd still choose the truth. Because some things, like dignity, aren't worth trading for any pension. Now, my story isn't just a case file, it's a symbol. For anyone who's ever felt alone in a dangerous system. I no longer need to prove anything to anyone. I just need to keep living in alignment with who I am, as I always have, and trust that somewhere, someone standing at the crossroads between silence and speaking up might hear this quiet reminder. You are not alone, and the truth will always find a way to be heard. My story isn't just a fight for justice. It's proof that even when the truth is buried deep, it still rises. I was once dismissed, called a problem, but my resolve and ethics turned me from someone forgotten into a symbol of integrity. Today, I live peacefully with my family, helping build stronger protections for whistleblowers, so no one ever has to choose between their career and the truth the way I once did. What do you think about Melissa's choice? Would you have the courage to stand up like she did? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, inspiring stories about family and integrity.